Welcome everyone to Earth Science, Air, and Space. I hope you've taken a moment to look at your e-learning website. We have a couple of things that I want to go over. This is being recorded in summer 2015, so in subsequent courses this may not look exactly alike, but you'll get the basic gist of our website here. It's important to use the tabs on the left-hand side over here on your e-learning page. We have things like announcements. You'll see I'll post current and updated information as we go throughout the semester. Sometimes I have questions from students that I think are important that everyone know the answer to, so you'll see them posted here. Here you'll have introductions, which is where your syllabus is located. Then you'll have multiple levels, either week 1, week 2, or section 1, 2, and 3, depending on whether it's a 5-week course or a 15-week course. As the semester goes on, I will open up these different tabs so that you can see these folders and get the information in there. Right now, if I click on week 1, you'll see you have a short welcome, and then you have folders that have each of the chapters that are covered in that week or that section. You'll also have the labs that are covered in that section. And when you scroll down, you'll see in week 1, we'll be covering a week 1 quiz. Depending on if you have sections or weeks, you may also have assignments in each one of them and tests. Lastly, you have an optional final. It's already available. However, I don't suggest taking it until we get towards the end of the semester. Optional comprehensive final is optional, which means you don't have to take it, but it will boost your grade by replacing your lowest test grade if you do end up choosing to take it. Today what we're going to be going over is our first chapter. It's an introduction to the course. And so we're going to look at what our course is going to be about. I'm Dr. Williams. I'll be teaching this course. We have here a complicated image of our Earth, and right now you probably don't understand any of it, but as we go through the semester this will make a lot more sense to you. However, why do you care about all those processes that are going on our Earth, and what is Earth science? We live on the Earth, but really, what are we going to be studying? Because that's a very large topic. When we study Earth science, we're looking at the Earth and how it interacts with its surrounding neighbors in space. So not only just the Earth and the processes that go on here where we live, but also what's going on in space and how that affects us. As you know, we haven't explored space too much. We are fascinated by it, and there's many methods for going out and looking at space. But there's still so many unknowns and so many hypotheses about what is in outer space. Earth science is generally covered in 4 parts: geology, oceanography, meteorology, and astronomy. However, Earth Science 2, in this course, we're going to only cover meteorology and astronomy. You may have taken Earth Science 1 that covered geology and oceanography. If you've not, it's not a problem. They overlap and they do complement each other, but it's not necessarily necessary to take one before the other. So what is meteorology? Even though it sounds like it should be talking about things coming from outer space, it's actually the study of our atmosphere and the processes that produce weather and climate here on Earth. We will be studying things like hurricanes and tornadoes, different types of tools and technology that we use, and also just looking at how these types of events impact our everyday life. Astronomy, on the other hand, is the study of the universe, the planets, the stars, looking at what is in outer space, the comets, how are our planets aligned, what else is beyond our solar system. This is, again, a still unexplored topic that has many unknowns about it. We're fascinated and we can view so much from a telescope, and we've sent a lot of spacecraft out into outer space in order to try and learn more, but there's still so much to discover out there. Why is it important? Why are you having to take this class? I'm sure if I asked, many of you would say that you're taking it to fill your elective requirements. The majority of my students are not science majors. They may not like science, and they may not really have an interest to go very far in science. However, it's important to understand where we live how our Earth works, and what we can do to protect it and make it sustainable. So in the future, we'll have more products, more resources, so that we can continue the lives that we lead. There's a lot of things that we take for granted every single day. Right now, I'm talking on a computer, sitting at a wooden desk, using electricity. I have my dog next to me. She just drank water. There is a lot of things that we use, and all of them come from our Earth, ultimately. The things that we use are called natural resources. A resource is something that we need, something that we use. And we have two different types of resources, renewable and non-renewable resource. Renewable resource is something that will grow back, and we usually think about it in terms of a human lifetime. So let's think about 100 years. So things like trees or the paper that comes from trees are a renewable resource. They can replenish themselves within 100 years. Also, things like animals that we eat, they are also a renewable resource. Non-renewable resources are things that are created on our Earth but will not be remade in the near future. So our fossil fuels, oil, coal, things that take hundreds of thousands of years to make, those are considered non-renewable resources. Once they're gone, we're not going to see them recreated again in our lifetime. We are depleting our resources. Human population is actually over 7 billion people now. It has been growing exponentially, and we continue to take resources out of our environment. Not only is it the number of people on the earth, but it's how much we consume. Actually, places like America that have less poverty than areas that are first world, are not first world countries, but are developing nations, we consume a lot of resources. Think about it. How many cell phones does your family have? How many cars does your family have? How many rooms in your houses exist? The ratio of the amount of resources that someone uses in America as compared to someone in Ethiopia are extreme. We use a lot. We are very wasteful in our country. There are many things that we can do as individuals that don't cost much and actually do save us money that will also help protect the earth. Simple things like turning off lights when you leave a room, using a reusable water bottle instead of always getting bottled water from the store, and recycling. They can all add up to keep our resources available and not use up as many. We'll be talking about this throughout the semester, and I want to make this something that you can apply to your own life. There are lots of big ideas and big concepts like climate change and global warming, and sometimes it's really easy to think, I can't help out with any of that stuff. But when we start doing little things and just become more aware of our environment, it can help in the long run. Here's some environmental ways that environmental pollution happens. In the top left, we have a landfill. We have trash. We make trash as human beings, and it doesn't just disappear. It has to go somewhere. And this is a landfill that it's going to take thousands of years to decompose, and that land won't be usable for a long time. I actually just took a field trip to Fresh Kills Park in New York City, or not New York City, it's in Staten Island in New York, and they have now been working to turn a landfill into a park with recreational activities and stop using it as a landfill. But it takes a long time for that to happen. And there's a lot of science that goes into it, a lot of engineering to make sure that different materials aren't leaking out into the ground. On the right, you can see air pollution comes from tons of different sources like factories and cars and just a lot of human population in one area. Bottom right is the Deep Horizon oil spill that happened in the Gulf of Mexico. And this is an example of how environmental pollution can happen even when we think something is supposed to be working safely. There were a lot of different people involved in this project, and somewhere along the line, the engineering went wrong, and the spill happened. It cost a lot to the people who live in that area. This is not just about the fish dying, but it's the fact that people whose spend their whole lives fishing now lose their industry. They can't feed their families, and they either have to find a new job or move out of the location. Economics plays a big part in why we care about the environment. While a lot of people do think certain animals are cute and big and fluffy, and we care that the polar bears aren't going to have their home, what really matters is, can we feed our family? Can we still survive in the landscape that's around us? To the bottom left is a picture of cows, a cow farm, and you can see how the runoff from the cow farm could leak down and get into our waterways. We have a couple of problems with cow farms. One is that runoff can cause fecal chloroform to be in our waterways and then make it unsafe to drink or swim or even recreate in. Another thing is cows actually fart a lot, and when they fart, they pass methane. I know, it's very silly, but there is a lot of methane released from the farts of cows, and that goes into our atmosphere and can actually be one of our biggest proponents of climate change. We always hear about CO2, and that's a human cause of climate change, a release that we've had from our factories, as you see in the top right picture. But we don't normally hear about things like adding more cow farms and factory farms for cows. It's going to add more animals on the earth, and it's going to actually cause a depletion in not only the amount of land that we have, but the amount of grass that's growing, and also add to our greenhouse gases. So when we're talking about this, it's kind of interesting to go back and think about, how do we get here? Why are we here? And while you may have a religious point of view or some other moral point of view of why we got here, it's important to know what the main scientific belief is as to how our Earth was formed. And that belief is the Big Bang Theory. And I like this slide. In the beginning there was nothing, which exploded, and now we have everything that we know of. It's a very abstract concept for many people, including myself. I've watched many videos about it, and I've watched many scientists try to explain what might possibly be going on with our ever-extending universe that just has no end and has no beginning. And it kind of blows my mind sometimes. So don't worry, you don't have to memorize or understand how the Big Bang Theory, how it all makes sense. You just have to know that the main scientific theory behind why our Earth is here is the Big Bang Theory. So we are located in the Milky Way galaxy, which it's not really any specific place in the whole entire universe. It's not the middle, it's not the end, it's somewhere out there in the universe. But a really interesting thing to look at is, when you look at where our galaxy is our sun is also right here. So it is not in the middle of the galaxy, it's not in the side of it, it's just on one of the spiral arms. So when we start talking about astronomy, and we start thinking about how at one point scientists thought that the Earth was the center of everything, the center of the universe, it's kind of interesting to think that our sun isn't even the center of the galaxy, let alone the center of the universe. Another question is, how do we study earth sciences? And we can study so many different aspects about it. I've already shown slides with many interesting phenomena that are going on in our world every single day. And so some of the things that we do is, different scientists study different time scales. Some may be looking at geologic time scales, so looking back to the Big Bang Theory, looking back to how our Earth was created, looking back to 4 billion years ago to see what the formation was that was occurring. Other scientists tend to look at days, weeks, or years. A lot of scientists that are studying how plants grow may be looking at seasonal aspects. If you're looking at weather, you may be interested in what's the weather going to be in a week. Usually when you're looking at hurricane forecasts, you're looking about a week out. However, if you're looking about rain, you might want to know, when's it going to rain in the next 24 hours, so you know what to wear, or whether take an umbrella with you. So it all depends on what you're studying, what time scale you're going to study. Some scientists also look at a specific species and then they'll be concerned about their actual life cycle. So they might look at a certain species that lives to be 30 years, so that's going to be the temporal scale that they're interested in. We also can look at the spatial scale. So depending on what you're interested in, you might be looking at a very fine or local scale, which is going to be very zoomed in and focused on a small area. Or you may be looking very coarse or globally about a situation. Some of the reasons that we're able to now study such large spatial scales is we have new technology and tools like satellites and aerial photography that allow us to see things that are bigger than what our eyes can just see. So on the bottom right picture, there's a barrier island that you can see how the sediment is moving around. Without having aerial photography, it's really hard to capture all that movement. If you were just standing on the beach in one local spot, that might be all that you'd be able to study. We also can see very, very fine detail. If you look at that Google image, anyone can look up their house on Google Earth. They can zoom in. Sometimes you can even see whether or not your car is in your parking lot or your driveway. You can see in this picture on the top right, it's easy to see that there's tennis courts in the middle of those in that picture because our resolution is so good that we can really, really look at a very fine scale. We also may be interested in a microscopic level if we're looking at water quality or total daily limits of certain organisms or chemicals that are in a water column. We might have to look at the microscopic scale, so very small scale, but if we have stuff like pollution in our rivers that makes it unable to be consumed by humans, that's a really important topic of study. So when we're looking at the world, what scientists typically use is called the scientific inquiry methods of testing science, or the scientific method or scientific inquiry. It's a general flow of how scientists all throughout the world look and investigate the Earth. And there's some general steps that scientists take, and every study will take you in your own little way, depending on if you have to go back and repeat different experiments or if you get to just continue on. But in general, this is the flow that you see. You choose a topic, you identify a problem, you have to research the problem, develop a hypothesis, design the experiment, test the hypothesis by doing the experiment, analyze the results, and form a conclusion. Depending on what happens after you form your conclusion, you may publish your data, or you might have to go back and start all over again. Some keywords here. The main keyword is the hypothesis. That's an educated guess. It's always written as a statement, not a question, and it can be supported or not supported. When we're doing a test like this, you're testing a hypothesis and your results either going to support it or not support it. We never are proving a hypothesis. We can only prove theories. Theories are things like the theory of gravity or the theory of relativity, something that is tested over and over and over and has not ever seen to fail. You have to have many, many tests before that you can prove a theory. So anything that you do in this class, anytime you're talking about any tests, you're going to either support your hypothesis or it's not going to be supported by your data. So an example of this would be you wake up in the morning and you go to make your coffee. And when you go to turn on the coffee maker, it doesn't work. So you decide maybe it's not, your problem is I can't make my coffee. So you research the problem. You wonder why you can't make the coffee. You take a look at the machine. You develop a hypothesis. You say, my coffee pot is not plugged in. So your experiment is to plug it in and see if it works. So you plug it in, you see if it works, and it still doesn't work. So then you have to go back and start over. Maybe it's that the machine is old and there's a mechanical part broken. Maybe it's that the outlet's connected to a light switch and the light switch is turned on. Those are very, very simple methods of using the scientific inquiry process. Basically, you figure out one thing that might be causing your problem, and then you try to alter it to see if that is the cause of it. When we're talking about Earth, there is a general structure to the Earth that you should be aware of. If you took Earth Science 1 in geology, we'll get more into depth in this. For this course, you just have to know that we have the center of the Earth as our core. The next layer is the mantle. The area on the outside of the Earth is the crust. It's actually one of the thinner layers, along with the atmosphere that surrounds the Earth. When we talk about meteorology, we'll be talking a lot about the atmosphere and how it interacts with the crust. When we look at that connection between the atmosphere and crust, we get 4 different spheres that interact, and they cause a lot of the processes that go on our Earth. So our atmosphere is very thin. We're able to breathe. It allows us to breathe, gives us protection from UV light. Of course, we should still always wear sunscreen. And that is when it interacts with the other parts of our Earth and space, that's where we get weather and climate. We have the hydrosphere, which is water. All of the water that exists on our Earth exists in different forms, from ice to the water in our air, and to the liquid water that we see in our oceans and our streams. These particles of H2O interact by evaporation, precipitation. They cause us to have a lot of our meteorological events. There's a lot of energy that's translated when water evaporates or precipitates that will fuel things like tornadoes and thunderstorms and hurricanes. Our biosphere is the living sphere. It exists everywhere, not just in trees, but also in our soil and all those areas. And last is the lithosphere, which is also called the geosphere. So this is all the solid parts of the Earth, the soil, the structures that we can stand on, parts that we see when we have volcanic eruptions and we create lava. All of these parts of our Earth interact together, and when these 4 spheres interact, we call them cycles. You may have heard of the carbon cycle and nitrogen cycle, but you're probably most familiar with the water cycle. Rain, evaporation, runoff, things that you probably learned way back in high school or even earlier. We also have interactions between the sun and space, which cause weather and climate, and oceanic circulations. We won't get too much in the ocean circulations this semester. That's also covered in Earth Science 1. And we have 2 sources of energy. Our main source of energy on Earth is the sun. That's where we get most of our energy, but we do have a lot of inner workings within the Earth creating geothermal energy. And that is my dog, Taylor Ham, enjoying some of the Earth's wind that she was getting while she was riding down the parkway. That ends our first chapter and our introduction in Earth Science 2, and I hope you enjoyed it and continue on to watch the rest of them.